Hello, everybody. Welcome. 43% of HR executives are also feeling this pain, so you're not alone. Again, not super shocking that it's a higher percent here, being that this is for budget constraints specifically. But it's good to have a pulse check and make sure we're kind of all on the same page and we all know what we're getting into. And so with that, I guess let's move on to our first discussion topic. And so the first thing in our report we kind of pulse checked on was our talent acquisition tactics. And it looks like TA teams are using a lot of tactics. That's great. You kind of need to be. You need to touch candidates everywhere that you can, digitally, at in-person events, all of that kind of stuff. So hiring events, social media, job boards, all of that stuff that's listed on this slide. But what's really interesting is 30% of the HR executives within that report said they feel like they weren't using enough tactics. So number one, if you're using any tactics that aren't listed here, would love to hear about those in the chat. But I feel like this is a pretty comprehensive list. But Natalie, I'd love to get your thoughts on what you make of all of this.
Yeah, happy to share. I do think that it's pretty common to stick with what we're comfortable with. So maybe using one or two of these tactics worked for you 5 years ago, but it's definitely the candidate journey is ever evolving. So you definitely should be using more than one tactic. So if you post your jobs on a job board, for example, you're probably going to reach active job seekers, but what about your passive ones? So that's great. Put them on there, but do something else. Have your hiring event still. You should still be doing that. If you are joining us because you're interested in organic content and posting on social media organically, do that. It's okay to do more than one. There's benefits to them all too. So paid advertising definitely has a place in your strategy. If you have the budget for it, sometimes that will be helpful. But as soon as you stop paying, those ads are going to stop being visible. So social recruiting and organic social posting is technically free. So you're always going to be able to continue to have that visibility on your content on social. So if I post on LinkedIn right now, I could say, check out this job. I could link out to the job. Of course, that's what our tool does. We automate that process for you, but it's free. I could go on there and do that. And a candidate could find that post anytime. Whereas if I was doing paid ads, perhaps those ads would stop appearing in that person's feed if I stopped paying for them. So if you're doing only one of these tactics, I would invite you to add some more into your strategy. Don't just be on job boards. Don't just have a hiring event and check that box. Really explore the other ways you can get your jobs visible to candidates. You want to have them in as many places as you can so that those candidates can find them wherever they are. Whenever I am meeting with a client for the first time, I like to simplify things. I like people to simplify things to me, like tell me like I'm 5. And to me, that really is just, okay, what are we doing here? We're putting your jobs where these people are hanging out. So unfortunately, we're hiding behind screens a little bit more. But fortunately, if you put your jobs on those screens, people are going to be able to see them where they're spending their time. So if somebody's on Facebook, somebody's on Twitter, somebody is on LinkedIn, it's hard to say where your future candidate is. Maybe they use all of those. So sprinkle your jobs everywhere so that people can find them if and when they're looking for them. So that's really my 2 cents on that. Let me know, Brian, if I missed anything.
Oh, that was a great 2 cents. The only thing I would add is I think we spend, and I'm guilty of this as well, we all spend a lot of our day being very tactical, thinking very tactically. And when we get a shot to kind of step back and be more strategic, one of the things that I fully believe is as TA leaders, it's really our responsibility, your responsibility to create or contribute to creating a culture of experimentation. And so we get caught up in the day-to-day, but I think it's important to say, you know, we're actively cultivating a culture of experimentation. Here's evidence that that culture is healthy and strong and growing. And then the other thing is, you know, it's not just about constantly experimenting and say, oh, that didn't work, that didn't work, that worked. You know, it's really more complex than that. I wish it were that easy, but you know, the experimentation works really well only if paired with a very good, thought out, scalable, repeatable method for validation. I've seen a couple organizations do a great job at this, and I've seen small ones do it really well. Giant organizations do it really well. I've also seen global organizations with no methodology for validation either. They're just saying, "Oh, we spend money on everything and we cross our fingers," right? And I think that pairing those two things, that culture of experimentation with also some really proven honed validation methods, is really important. And then the other thing, looking at all these, right, it's easy to get overwhelmed. Like, we're doing this, we're doing that, we're doing all of these things, in addition to all of the other responsibilities we each have. But I think differentiating, right, we live in every meeting anybody's on, someone says, well, how do I measure ROI? Or, we talk about analytics, we talk about data. There's a couple keywords. And I think in some cases, there is so much data. If you say, can I look at the data, right? There might just be thousands of data points and it's really overwhelming. And so getting disciplined and being, really fierce about how we prioritize actionable data, right? Because we don't want to be drowning in spreadsheets. What we want is, of those 100 numbers we could look at, what are the 2 numbers that really, really matter? And if I knew them, I could iterate or pivot or optimize just a little bit. And so one of the things we look at too is, it might be that the strategy or the tactic that you're using is a good one, but it's not working for you yet because you're just not quite positioning it right. You're just not posting maybe at the right time of day or on the right platform, or the message, you're almost there. You're maybe one iteration away. So I think that method for how we validate the effectiveness of our experiments is really less about proving did it work, did it not work, and it's more about saying, am I gleaning and getting the data that I need to refine and optimize so it's working better and better every time I do it? That's my 2 cents, but you can tell I've got some passion around those ideas.
Yeah, and I think that's all super important too, right? Like, not all of these tactics were built to do the same thing. Wouldn't it be so nice if we could just use one thing and it would meet all of the things that we want to do? But that's just not reality. And unfortunately, we have to use a bunch of different things, and we need to figure out how they work and what you kind of need to put into those tactics to make them work, which it sounds a lot easier when I just say it like that, but then you actually get into them and you have to do the work to do that. And so kind of another theme of this report and what we'll talk about next is, again, like what you put into those tactics. And in particular, what HR executives are struggling with is promoting their employer brand. And so as you see here, everybody knows it's super important, but people are still struggling to do it. And so, Brian, I would love your 2 cents on this, because you kind of started to talk about the things that you put into it matter, and how important employer brand is and where you could do that and everything like that.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I tend to think of employer brand, right? So this comes from my own personal view, but the companies that we work at, right, we've usually inherited, right? So if I think about employer brand, we've each inherited an employer brand, and at some point probably someone else is going to inherit it from us, right? So I think of our roles as caretakers of that brand. And in addition to all of the tactical things we're doing, all of the things we're getting measured on in our reviews and on a regular basis, your performance metrics, one of the deeper things we're doing is we're caretakers for this brand, right? So we want to leave it better than how we found it. And to me, that's a really important framework. It's really important to come back to that and kind of anchor in that. It's a difficult thing to do because it's easy to get lost in that day to day, which is important. And then the other thing I think about is, a lot of the things that we do. One of my favorite jobs ever actually was being a barista. And I think the reason I loved it so much and I was good at it, it was like, so sometimes I walk by the place I used to work and it's been a long time. And I'm like, the good old days, But I think what I really enjoyed is that someone could come up, tell you what they needed, you could make that thing, and just a few moments later, it's done, and you're handing it off, and it's over. Like, and in the kinds of jobs most of us have, so few things are like that, right? We're chugging for months, quarter over quarter, sometimes year over year on these projects that are continuing to evolve and grow. So I think while it's really nice to get those quick hits and get things that you're like, I spent $5 on that and I got a return on that investment the next day and I was able to see it. Employer brand is incredibly important. It's foundational. And unfortunately, it is one of those things that if you look at over a course of 3 days or 3 months, you're not even you're too close to it. You're not gonna see it. But if you were to take a picture now and then take a picture 3 years later, you're going to see a massive difference. So I think it's one of those things to kind of accept and embrace the fact that it is a long but powerful journey. And for me, one of the quotes I really like is the most important things are not always the most urgent, because I tend to default to the most urgent and I really have to work hard not to. And I would say, I'd be surprised if anyone disagreed that employer brand is not one of the most important. So that's a little bit of a free train of thought, but hopefully there's some kernels there.
Yeah, definitely. I think what stands out to me is that it's a long-term strategy. I think that's what resonates with me the most. And that's what I share with a lot of my clients who want to dive into the data right away. Hey, I made these changes. I have to share this information with my stakeholders as soon as possible. That sense of urgency is there. I need to show I'm doing my job. How can we prove that? It can be really challenging to quantify what you're doing when it comes to employer branding efforts, because once again, explain it to me like I'm 5. I always think of the candidate journey. So maybe like I follow this page called Gray TV, and they have really cool benefits. So one of them is free healthcare, which I'm like, wow, a company offering free healthcare, that's amazing. What a great benefit. So imagine me, if I am a passive candidate. Obviously, I don't want to leave CareerArc and Brian, but pretend I'm the passive candidate in this scenario, and they have a job one day, maybe not right now, but maybe one day that I'm interested in. And I remember, oh yeah, I've been absorbing their content. They have free healthcare. They have all these great things. And then it's time to make that change. You may see the conversion 3 years later, but you are posting the content now. You're being consistent with it, and you're putting it out there for candidates to find, once again, if and when they're looking. But they are scrolling. They are seeing it. If they follow your brand, they're going to consistently take in the message that you're giving them, your employer brand message, your EVP, that give and get. It's more important now than ever, especially the demographic entering the workforce. What they care about is not being a number in an organization. They want to feel valued. They want to align their values with your values. So there's probably a lot of good content on your career site that's already there that you just need to get onto social media, into the feed, so that your employer brand message is consistent and visible, really.
The other thing I want to emphasize too, that I think maybe we overlook, and maybe some of us are very keenly familiar, but employer brand is one of those things that even if you think your CEO understands it, they probably don't, and they should understand it better. So don't assume that executive leadership just gets it. I think really, having and continuing to cultivate an understanding with other executive leaders, if you're in an executive role, if you're not in the C-suite, right, getting other people on board. Because I think anything, employer brand or just brand in general, anybody with a marketing background will totally get it. I think a lot of times folks nod their head and kind of pretend like they get it, but they really, in their hearts, it really hasn't quite clicked yet. And so, I don't have any proven methods for how to get the light bulb to go on. But if you can turn your CEO, turn your other C-suite or VP executives into evangelists, get them to the point where they've drank the Kool-Aid, right? Like, and they really understand the long-term benefits, because a lot of us, just like we're operating tactically day to day, they're often operating tactically day to day. And I think, any organizations where you've successfully been able to get in, with a CEO who really gets it, who really is there with you, invested, sees the importance of employer brand, understands that it's a journey. Suddenly, I think a lot of things become easier. You're going to get more support, and I think a lot of organizations, the TA team or even the HR team, if they're generalists, they get it, right, and we get it amongst ourselves. But I think people outside of our industry and maybe without our backgrounds, they don't quite get it. So I want to emphasize that, because I think a lot of people move forward and wonder why they encounter resistance, and it's just we've got to really educate folks and get them on the train. We're
And
still
everybody calls it
there.
something different.
Yeah.
Like that you brought that up. Maybe you don't call it employer brand at your organization. Maybe it's, what's our culture? What's our message? What do we stand for? What's our reputation? So it's
How
all
do we
under
want
the
people to see and
umbrella.
perceive us? Yeah,
What'd you say?
that's the other one. Yeah.
I didn't hear what you said, Brian. I'm sorry.
Well, I was just saying, how do we, asking the question, how do we want people to see and perceive us? I
Yep.
found that a lot of executive leaders also are, perception, right, is really important. So, and these are all different ways to say the same thing, which I think, Natalie, you're absolutely right. Like, figure out the messaging that your executive leadership will respond to, figure out what's important to them, what they measure themselves on, what they get measured on. Asking the question like, hey, I plan on being here in 3 years. I assume we plan on being here in 3 years. So it's important to think about the day to day, but let's also spend some time thinking about doing some favors for us 3 years from now, right? I think that's all really important too.
Definitely.
Yeah, totally. And so let's talk about that, right? Obviously, we mentioned employer brand is a long-term strategy. Natalie, you touched a little bit on conversations with your clients, explaining that social recruiting, it's a long-term strategy. And we don't necessarily see that instant gratification that maybe Brian saw at his barista job when he was able to just hand someone a cup of coffee and he instantly saw how happy they were. But unfortunately, you need the proactive with the reactive, right? So what we're kind of seeing is employer brand and organic social recruiting, they go hand in hand. Obviously, so does recruiting and all of that stuff, but really organic is going to be kind of your bread and butter for your employer brand promotion. And so we also talked a little bit too about, and it came up a few times talking about the people of the organization. And I think that plays a critical piece in your employer brand and also in your social recruiting strategy. So Natalie, I know you talk to clients a lot about this to clients a lot. So I'd love to hear just like more of what you share with them and your perspective on all of that coming together.
Yeah. So I usually encourage them to ask everyone in the organization to be what we call a brand ambassador or an employee advocate. So bottom line is people trust people. So if everyone in your organization was willing to share either job content to their personal LinkedIn profile, for example, or employer brand content, maybe, hey, we just had this great party. We always do something for Halloween. We always have the Halloween contest. Hey, every year we do this community involvement activity where we still get paid for that day of work and we go and all volunteer together. If everyone's willing to share that online, then anyone in their network is going to see that content about your brand, about your organization, and think, oh, wow, Natalie really likes where she works. If there happens to be a job opening there one day that aligns with my values, I'm more likely to apply. So it all comes back to that long-term strategy. And I think it always starts with TA and recruiters. Oh, they're the only ones who can share this, but that's not true. You can really post that content on anyone's profile, but the strategy will be different in what I recommend. TA professionals, recruiters, you can post more often on LinkedIn and more heavy job content, but maybe somebody in C-suite, maybe they just need an employer brand post going out to their page every week. And maybe they help you share a top priority position or some hot jobs. Maybe they help you with that at a lower frequency as well. Maybe it's district managers, branch managers, store managers, maybe those people who aren't even in charge of the actual interview hiring process, maybe those people are willing to share job content in their location. So, I mean, it's really a domino effect. You can really find people who will be interested in sharing that content, but I think it goes into some of the things we'll talk about later. We really need to set those people up for success if and when they say, yes, I do want to do that. I want to be a brand ambassador for this company.
I echo everything Natalie says. I mean, that's perfect. That's on the nose, exactly right, 100%.
This is the one I'm passionate about.
Yeah, no, it's really important. I think the one thing that I ask people to do is, any type of marketing, any type of messaging, the more empathy we can cultivate for the person on the other side, and in this case, that's the job seeker. I see a lot of, if we look at job descriptions, for example, right? Like people will spend, thousands of dollars promoting an individual job, and then when people get to the job description, it's the ugliest thing you've ever seen. You have to click on 5 different things to even apply. And then once you're trying to apply, you have to set aside 45 minutes. And so there are lots of things that if we just kind of put our empathy hat on, our job seeker hat on, and we kind of stand in their shoes for a little while, the solutions become obvious, right? And there's a lot to be learned from the user design, user interface industry, where people have really thought about even physical design, right? When you walk into a place that's been really well designed, it just feels like you've been there before, and everything makes sense. And there's a lot to be said for when we're on social media, thinking about what is the type of content we're putting out there, right? Because it's not enough anymore to go grab the link from your ATS and go slap it on Facebook or whatever and hope that people will find that compelling. I mean, there are cute kittens everywhere on the internet, and the competition for attention is fierce. I mean, so there's certainly a lot to be said there. I think the other thing tied to that is also don't be intimidated, right? Like, there's a lot of content out there. There's a lot of good content. And I've encountered a lot of recruiters who are kind of shy about using social media, either because they don't know how their employer really feels about it, because, to Natalie's point, their employer hasn't kind of expressly encouraged it or set guidelines, or, kind of that positive reinforcement. The other thing is, especially for people who maybe didn't grow up with these platforms as a day to day, it's a learned skill, right? It feels, to me, there is something. I would never do karaoke. I've never done it. It's never going to happen. We've got an on-site coming up in a couple weeks. It's still never going to happen. But for me, it makes me nervous even thinking about it. And it might be kind of strange to believe, but I've had recruiter Callum saying, well, we'll see about that. There are recruiters out there who I've met and I've talked with, and they just feel this anxiety when it comes to making any sort of post. What if I say the wrong thing? What if I pick the wrong image? What if it sounds dorky or silly, right? We also worry about our individual brands and kind of protecting that. Nobody wants to be judged. And so I think it goes back to creating an environment, cultivating an environment where people are empowered, feel safe, feel comfortable, and then really don't worry. I think over time, the type of content will kind of optimize and you can experiment with things. I think just like any good habit, right? The key is to do it on a consistent basis, get comfortable with it, and then from there you will get better and better and better.
Yeah. Yeah. And I feel, Brian, that feeling's definitely shared amongst HR. I mean, when we talk about the next stat about how I think it's like 32% of HR executives reported that they don't have an effective way to use social media. And part of that is probably, yes, people are intimidated. Part of it might be that they don't have the right tools. So I think we should talk about that a little bit. Like, what does this actually look like? What does this all mean? And so I think let's start off with, like, we're on a constrained budget session, right? Like, everybody here, let's imagine, has $0 to add into their strategy. What can they do today to make an impact on social media? And Natalie, I know you talk about this a lot and things like that. So I'd love to get your thoughts.
Yeah, absolutely. There's so much that you can do for free. Social media is free. So, of course, if budget is the biggest concern, you should still be posting on social. But kind of to what Brian was saying, we need to instill confidence in our people to make them feel comfortable if they are willing to share content. So, let's kind of start at the top. I think that we have TA and we have marketing usually, and you kind of share the social space now. It's hard to say like who should own it, because marketing is, me and Christina have these conversations a lot. It's really fun. But marketing, they're really driving business. Their audience is hopefully going to, let's pretend, purchase a product, purchase something that you're trying to sell them. And then your TA team is over here on social media, and they are trying to reach the audience of candidates. So they're trying to drive that candidate flow. So you have two audiences and you're sharing the same space on social media. So it's kind of like hot potato. And I think the best thing that you can do when you're starting off with nothing is align on who does what. So marketing, I always recommend, can you set your TA team up for success by providing a brand kit, for example? Here are the fonts, colors that you can use. Here's a library, a shared Google Doc of all the images that are okay to use. If they don't even have that, you could say, just make sure you don't use images with stock imagery. Make sure you're always using real people in our organization. Whatever those guidelines are, share that with your people so that they can feel confident posting on social while still being in brand. They are still representing your organization. If they're posting a job saying, I'm recruiting for this job, of course, we all see that the alignment that needs to happen there with your brand. So starting with that is the best part. And then you can kind of get into more of the details. Where do you want to post and what do you want to post? So it's usually based on, for me, I do personas. So of course I have my hiring team. They probably want to post a lot more heavy job content. C-suite might be interested in posting more culture content. So decide what goes where so that when you are ready to execute, you're not all over the place. Just, oh, I'm supposed to post something on LinkedIn today. What was it? So build that out, plan out what that's going to look like, and then decide maybe how often, because we recommend consistency. So you need a dedicated person on your team. So whether it is somebody in marketing, whether you have an employer brand team, whether it's somebody on the TA side, just empower them, set them up for success to be able to manage that for you. Really having a dedicated person is so helpful, because you need to be consistent with this. So if you don't have the budget to automate, let's say, if you don't have the budget for paid ads, you need to dedicate someone who's going to be able to do this organically on a consistent basis. You need that stuff always there. You need your content always on social for people to find it. It has to be consistent. Or I want it to be consistent for you.
Totally. Yeah. And I mean, there's tons of free tools out there too, right? Like when I first started in marketing, I was tracking pretty much everything that was going on this Excel template that makes the calendar for you. And it has it in all different tabs where you could say, I'm doing this on this day and this on this day, which that was quite a few years now. But now we even have things like ChatGPT where you could say like, hey, I have this job. I want to highlight XYZ about the job. Can you help me with a caption for social media? And it'll spit out options for you. Obviously, always check those captions and make sure they're accurate. Never trust AI 100%. But the point is, there's a lot of free tools out there to help you. And then once you get this program off the ground, you get buy-in, everybody gets it. Now everybody wants to participate and you need to scale it. That's kind of what we do here at CareerArc. And so I'll let Natalie kind of take that again, because she talks to our clients a lot and things like that, but we'll just quickly touch on that before we wrap. So when you are ready, and there's a lot of automation tools out there, when you are ready, you have the tools in your tool belt and you're ready to pull them once you're set to go.
Yeah, absolutely. So really what we do on our side is we're really automating this process for you, like Christina said. So we're going to integrate with your ATS. So we'll always feed your job data directly into our tool. And then from there, in an automated job campaign, you get to decide what you want to do with those jobs. So you can, I have people with 500 campaigns running right now with 500 different people in their organization who have opted into this. So I always say we build the house first and then you can decorate. So, they obviously work with me through all of that. We don't just flick the switch on and have 500 campaigns running in 5 seconds, but it feels like it sometimes. So really automating your job content, your employer brand content to social media. That's our bread and butter, is we can publish to LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and your team's personal LinkedIn profiles. Those are the brand ambassadors, the employee advocates. So instead of somebody manually doing that every day for hours and hours and hours, it'll take them a lot of time. We have a cute little argument here at CareerArc, some banter in between teams on how much time we think it would take somebody who's not technical savvy at all to create a post on their own that we automate. So it has to have a caption, a link to the job, the photo you want to use, and strategic hashtags. So somewhere between 3 and 5 minutes is what we believe. So times that by however many posts you need across 500 profiles, and there you have it. That is not sustainable. So to save your team time to automate the process, exploring tools like ours is very beneficial, especially because if you're a TA manager, I'm going to assume you didn't go to school for marketing or social media. So it's kind of nice to have a guide, an employer brand strategist like myself in your back pocket who can really help you and hold your hand through all of that.
Awesome. Love that. Great. So we'll take down the slides. We'll go into the Q&A session. Sorry, our faces are going to get really big on your screens. But before we do that, actually, we do have, by the way, a social recruiting live talent attraction series coming up. So we have a lot of great speakers. So number one, the good thing is I am taking off the hosting crown and I'm giving it back to Natalie. So she's going to run these sessions. And so the first one, Natalie will sit and she'll do a social recruiting 101 session, just talking about how you can use social recruiting regardless of if you have all the tools in the world or none of the tools, just so you get a basic understanding. Because then later in the series, we're bringing on some of our clients who do this really, really well. Again, they're super advanced. They'll talk about things that maybe you're not ready to do yet, but it's always good to know what you should be working toward. And so right now we have Jennifer Dale, the VP of recruiting at Gray Television, coming on in our March session. We have Kate McKinley, the TA partner at Lazy Dog Restaurant. And then we're working on May 7th. So be patient with us, but we will have somebody good on there for you all. So I highly encourage you to register for that. We'll include the registration link in the email as well, along with the report and the recording to this and all that. So you'll have all the things that you need. And that, again, will either get out tomorrow or Monday, depending on how fast we can get the recording and things up like that. And so with that, we'll jump into Q&A. So again, feel free to drop your questions in the Q&A box. If you want to be anonymous, if you don't care and you'd rather submit it through the chat, that's totally fine. We do have a couple in. And so I'm just going to get us started, and then we'll see where this takes us. So the first question, and I feel like this might be quite a few people on the call as well. This person, they have no social media presence for recruitment yet. So where do they even start? And I know we touched on it a little bit in the discussion, but maybe Natalie, if you have some like concrete steps of like, start with this and then add this and then et cetera, et cetera. And I'm sure you do.
Totally. Really, if you are a recruiter and you are listening and you want to post jobs on social media and you've never done it before, really a simple caption, or like Christina touched on earlier, ChatGPT will spit out a ton of great social media captions. You could even say, make it more casual, make it more professional, make it more witty, use alliteration. So if you wanted something really easy to do, you could just do something as simple as, hey, LinkedIn connections, hey, LinkedIn community, and then say, I have a really exciting job that I want to share with you. Put the link to the job from your ATS in there, from your career site, paste that individual job right in there. And if you're like, well, what hashtags do I use? You could just use a hashtag, whatever your company name is. That's great for employer branding. Or you could do hashtag, if it's a job in Portland, do hashtag Portland jobs. If it's a job in a really rural city, do that city name, and then do the bigger city that's close to it where people might commute from, and then do a job title hashtag. So when in doubt, job title, job location, company name. Those are great hashtags. That's what a candidate is going to search for online. I'm going to search for remote CSM jobs, but I'm not going anywhere. You're stuck with me. But you get what I mean. So it's that simple. It doesn't need to be too long. Our attention spans are not there anymore. We are scrolling through tons of content. So just give them what they need. Is it a job I'm interested in? Is it in a place that I can work or want to work? And then if you do, added bonus, add a photo or a video or a GIF. It's going to stand out so much more. You see those people sharing jobs on LinkedIn, and it's just that tiny little job. So-and-so is sharing a job or something like that. View the job. I don't stop. That doesn't stop the scroll for me. I love it when someone has a fun image. So go find a clip art. If marketing has some guidelines for you, use those images. But just try, just start. Like Brian said, don't be afraid to experiment. Don't be afraid to fail. It's that simple.
I'm really surprised you didn't go really hard on the don't use hashtag hiring. I know that's your favorite thing.
Don't use hashtag hiring, hashtag jobs. As a candidate, I'm never going to search for hashtag hiring. I'm going to search for the job title that I'm qualified for. It might be more than one job title, but you get what I mean.
The things that I would say to augment that, absolutely agree with everything Natalie said. The two components that I think about are, content and followers have this interesting relationship where if you have 0 followers and you post something, you very well might get 0 likes and 0 comments and 0 shares. But there's also a chance that someone you didn't know or someone you weren't connected with, the algorithms have their own mysterious way of when you post content, it'll help grow your audience, grow your network. So think about, spending some time. So if you're on the individual level, thinking as an individual person, how can I grow my audience? Look at that who you might know category. Sync up some of your contacts. Like there's a lot of opportunity. I think people sometimes make a couple of posts and they don't get traction right away and they kind of give up. But we have to both post consistently and grow our network. And sometimes posting does help us grow our network, but there are other things we can do: invite, follow, so on and so forth, become part of groups, make comments on other people's posts. That's a great way. So I think just being engaged in the online community is a great way to do that. So think not only about content posting, but about audience expansion and audience development. The other thing that I think is really cool is, a lot of times we see organizations get stuck in some form of either analysis paralysis, where they are starting to overthink, how should we do it? What's our voice? Are we more of a George Clooney or like a Julia Roberts? What's our brand personality? And then like 6 months later, we're still working on it. We haven't posted anything. So I think keep it simple. Think about it in two buckets. One is the brand level bucket, and that's the one where maybe there are more toes to step on. You want to take more time, be more intentional. But then there's also the job level, right? Where people are really already doing this. We're able to be more comfortable about how we share job content, how we promote individual jobs. And so for a lot of people, I would say maybe start with job content, but continue to do both of these things in parallel. Think about how can my brand level content and my brand strategy be reflected in my job level content and my job distribution strategy. And so don't just put it all in one bucket and then be intimidated by it. Move forward at all costs. Doing something is better than nothing. And the other thing is, it's fun to browse and see what other people are doing and be like, hey, that their post is way worse than my post that I just made. So go around, be judgy, also glean some good ideas. Be like, oh, that's a clever idea. Put that in your back pocket. Use that tomorrow. It's really fun. The internet is searchable, and spend an hour on LinkedIn, on Facebook. If anybody asks, you say it's work, right? Hey, I'm doing this for work. I'm not just on Instagram for fun.
Yeah, that's what I do. I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
I did just get really excited by something you said though, which was, fun fact, if no one follows you and you post on LinkedIn, people when they're searching on LinkedIn could still see your posts. They're not just searching for jobs or people, posts pop up as well. So keep that in mind. If you don't have a huge network, you can still post, because people outside your network will see it as long as your page is not private.
Totally. Yeah, and it looks like we have another question too. And I know we're about at time. So again, we will send out the recording in case you are curious for the answer to this. I'm also going to read it out loud because people who watch the recording will not be able to view the question like we all can in the chat. So the question is, we hire call center agents in Kansas City. It's been challenging trying to get applicants. Social media organically also is hard, and cost per lead for paid campaigns is kind of costly. Indeed is a good option, but we don't want to put all our eggs in one basket. What else can we do to attract more?
Go ahead, Brian.
My favorite part here is, I think, I had someone recently tell me that they were having good outcomes with paid, but the problem was they couldn't scale it because it was so expensive. They said, we can't afford to continue just doing paid. Right, so kind of exploring how can we do paid and organic at the same time, have them augment each other, and really, again, with limited budgets, how do we get what we need? And I think one of the things that that I've seen a lot of is by optimizing the content that we're putting out there, either on paid or on social or both, we can really get that dollar to reach further. So one example that I think of, I don't think I'm allowed to share the customer name, but we did on the Lumina side, we did an A/B study where we took a customer who had been previously spending ad dollars promoting a static image ad, and they'd been doing this for more than a year. And they were actually fairly happy with their results. They were happy with what they were seeing. And then we gave them a video version of that ad. So it was a 10-second video, very short. For the same number of dollars, the same ad spend, they were able to source 8 times the applies, right? So we just optimized that content, and suddenly they were getting more bang for their buck. That's not universally true, right? There's not like a magic wand that we can wave, but really thinking about, shifting the medium of content from, if you're doing text only, add an image. If you're doing image only, try video. There are lots of different options, and I think really optimizing what we're doing is a great way. Like, we're always going to have to spend some money. Organic is always important too. It's a combination of tactics that we're doing. But optimization really should be, there are ways to really move that needle.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that this question, Maria, it looks like it encompasses everything that we support our clients with every day. And similar to what Brian said, my brain went straight to how could we make your content stand out more? So I would, if you were my client, I would say, okay, let me look at your job description. And of course, call center roles are probably tricky in any location, but some people will say, okay, I want to add some information in my caption about maybe why our call center agents are the right choice versus anybody else hiring call center agents. Do you have any benefits you can brag about? Is the pay worth bragging about? Can we lean into, if not, can we lean into the location? Is it a desirable place to live? Do you offer any sort of what's the word I'm looking for? Reimbursements if they do need to travel farther into a call center, things like that could be so nice to have in the caption to at least get people to your job description to then apply. How could we kind of get a little more interest to get them to go over there in the first place and make you the better choice than anybody else who has those open roles? So anything you can brag about, brainstorm on that, because that could be your golden ticket right there.
Totally. And Natalie, off the location thing too, use Kansas City jobs in all of your social media posts. Make sure you're popping up for people who live in that location, right? Like, if you have a specific location that you need to hire for and it's not really applicable to any other region, put the city in there because you'll start popping up on their feeds because they live there and they engage with content for that city and everything like that. So try all of those things and make sure you're seen. I think that's the biggest thing too. And obviously, yeah, everybody wants to know what's in it for them. So let them know what's in it for them.
Yeah, I love that. Great advice.
Perfect. That was a Natalie Brodie special. It sounded really great, but I've learned so much from Natalie. So
Thank you. I'm passionate.
awesome. Well, it looks like that was all the questions again. And especially kind of the part that Natalie just touched on with what to put in your job post, what to include, all of that stuff will absolutely be in the 101 session. So if you're curious, like, I want to learn how to start doing this stuff on my own, attend that session because it's going to be a really good one. And again, all the other sessions, it will be um, leaders talking about kind of more robust programs. But again, you could pull things from that, right? Like, oh, I really like that they use this type of image or that they use this in their strategy. So don't get overwhelmed when you start to hear those conversations too. Take it as I need to start somewhere and I'm going to pull little by little and start making small steps. We have a company value here where it says inches matter. And with social media, like that totally matters. So just make sure you're taking the steps and don't give up after a month. It's a long-term strategy. We talked about that. So just make sure you're giving it the time and the love that it needs to succeed. Awesome. And so again, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me, Brian, or Natalie, or anything like that. We hope to see you in those sessions. Otherwise, I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.